and welcome to GGS, the show that tackles the history of civilization in connection to international relations. I am Michael Angelo S. Lopez, your host.
And of course, Angelica Giuliano, your co-host. In today's episode, we will discuss Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fate of Human Societies by Jared Diamonds, a short history of everybody of the last 13 years. The book offers a comprehensive analysis of the historical forces that have been shaped human societies. It provides a thought-provoking perspective on the role of geography, agriculture, disease, and technology in determining the fates of different civilizations.
This episode explores all the chapters of the book, but before we proceed, let's have a brief background on the author. So, let's commence! Jared Diamonds is a popular American non-fiction author. He writes science books in a number of fields, ranging from evolutionary biology to anthropology to geography and genetics. Born on September 10, 1937, Jared Mason Diamond belongs to a Jewish family. His mother, Flora Kaplan, was a linguist, teacher, and a pianist, while his father, Lois K. Diamond, a physician. Following his mother's footsteps, he also took lessons in piano.
He received his early education from Roxbury Latin School and obtained his bachelor's degree from Harvard College. Later, he studied at the prestigious Trinity College, University of Cambridge, where he did his PhD in physiology and biophysics in 1961.
Subsequent to becoming a junior fellow at the Harvard in 1968, UCLA Medical School offered him a position as a professor of physiology. His career branched out as he worked in the field of ornithology and ecology. Decades later, he again switched his career and became a geography professor teaching environmental history at the UCLA. Since we are talking about guns, germs, and steel, what comes to your mind?
When we say guns, I think of weapons and technology, germs, something like diseases or viruses, and steel, I think something hard.
Oh, hard! Anyways, let's explore the purpose of the book.
Guns, Germs, and Steel is a multidisciplinary study that employs anthropological, biological, evolutionary, and socioeconomic analysis to chart the fates of different peoples throughout the human history and understand why some groups succeed to develop and advance while others haven't.
In addition, there are contextual factors that influence Diamond's perspective and writing approach. Want to know what are they? Here, we will enumerate the following key highlights of the book before we begin.
First, geographic determinism. Diamond asserts that the primary drivers in shaping human history are the geographical and environmental factors of a region. Second, the importance of agriculture. Diamond argues that the pivotal turning point in human history was the development of agriculture from hunter-gatherer to settled farming communities. Third, domestication of plants and animals. Diamond analyzed the presence of suitable plants and animal species that could possibly domesticate certain regions that have a head start in developing agriculture.
Fourth, we have disease and immunity. Diamond highlighted the impact of infectious disease during the European colonization that affected native populations.
So later on, we will discuss what kind of diseases and immunity are present and mentioned in the book, right?
Yes. Fifth, technological advancement and conquest. Diamond argues that due to the uneven distribution of technological advancements, regions such as Eurasia dominate certain societies. Sixth, challenging traditional explanations. The traditional arguments for injustices in society, such as superiority of race or intellect, are contested in this book.
And now, we are going to the exciting part. With our guest for today's episode, we will discuss and answer various questions through the book. In particular, how European societies managed to colonize the world.
In today's episode, we will be having two guests that are knowledgeable with a passion for geopolitical history. They're going to share with us their insights, perspective, and thoughts. Our guests today, Ms. Zaylene Jo de Guzman and Ms. Justice Rosete. Hello, Zaylene and Justice.
Good day, GGS.
Hi, good day, GGS.
Well, have a nice day to us.
How are you feeling today, GGS?
Good.
I'm currently nervous at the moment.
Excited to discuss and explain about this book.
Anyway,
Great.
It's kind of interesting the topic we have right now.
yes, especially with our course, right?
Yes.
Of course. Now, we will discuss the ins and outs of the controversial book Guns, Germs and Steel by Jared Diamonds, the fate of human societies, and offer listeners a special surprise at the very end. Be sure to listen all the way through for the details. On the chapter 1 of Guns, Germs and Steel entitled Up to the Starting Line. For our first question to open the topic, what are the historical developments of different continents?
Well, on 11,000 BC, the historical development of different continents or the beginning of the village life. The first undisputed people of the Americans, the end of Pleistocene era, the last ice age, and the start of the what geologists term the recent era.
Oh, so can you give some examples that have mentioned in the book?
Jared Diamond mentioned in his book that our closest living relatives are gorilla, common chimpanzee, and pygmy chimpanzee, with abundant of fossils evidence that indicates that the earliest stage of human fossil evidence were also played out in Africa. The fossils indicate that the evolutionary line leading to us had achieved substantially upright posture and began to increase in body size. The first human ancestor to spread beyond Africa was the Homo erectus, the fossil discovered on the Southeast Asian island of Java known as the Java man.
So he adopted Darwin's theory of evolution since
Yes.
he mentioned Homo erectus and these kinds of people.
Yes.
So how about the tools that were used during this civilization?
Well, they used the modern stone tool, making people would scorn the stone tool as a very crude and only the ancestor cultural repertoire that can be documented was the use of fire. But
So can you elaborate these tools?
yes, the abundant evidence of bones and the other tools discovered from the Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and the
Homo neanderthalensis?
yes, and the Human History Atlas took off by 50,000 years. An earliest sign of the leaf came from the East African site and soon followed in near east of southeastern Europe, then followed by southwestern Europe, where the abundant artifacts are associated with fully modern skeletons of people termed Cro-Magnons. Well, the Cro-Magnons have multiples of modern weapons and clothing that testify their great ability to survive cold climate, and well preserved jewelry from buried skeleton that signify the spiritual development.
Wow, so as you have said, these Cro-Magnons have the great ability to survive the cold climate.
Yes.
How about the Neanderthals?
Well, About that, regarding that, Jared Diamond conclude after trying to know how the Neanderthal no longer existed in a few thousand years or 40,000 years. He said modern Cro-Magnons somehow used their far superior technology and their language skills or brain to infect, kill, or displace the Neanderthals, leaving behind little or no evidence of hybridization between Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons. Also, Cro-Magnons are the Europe where they advance in technology.
I am confused with this. Can you elaborate this kind of species?
Well, the Great Leap Forward coincides with the first proven major extinction of human geographic range since our ancestors' colonization of Eurasia. Within a short period of that initial peopling, humans had expanded over the whole continent and adapted to its diverse habitats. He explained that the things that where the human began, and he said that at end of the chapter that Eurasia was one of the responsible for rapid development of humans. But it turns out that the actual reason behind that was more rapid development of Eurasian society were not all the straightforward ones that our imaginary archaeologists of 11,000 BC guess. The remainder of this book consists of the quest to discover those real reasons.
Speaking of quests, let's find out some brutal ending of Moriori. On the chapter 2 of the Gans, Germs, and Steel, a natural experiment of history. To open our topic again, Ms. Zailene, can you give an example of a natural experiment in history?
Yes, there is one that explain the east of New Zealand, the brutal end of the Moriori people in December 1835.
In December 1835, what about that?
Yes, on that day, December 19, a ship carrying 500 Maori armed with guns, clubs, and axes arrived. Group of Maori began to walk through Moriori settlement, announcing that the
Moriori and Maoriori, it's like a tongue twister, right?
Yes. Sorry, sir.
It's hard to pronounce.
Yes.
Again.
Yes, announcing that the Moriori were now their slaves and killing those who objected. Moriori can defeat the Maoris and it's now outnumbered. However, Moriori has traditionally resolved dispute peacefully. They decided to offer peace against the Maori group, but before they offered that, Maori attacked them and killed hundreds of Moriori, cooked and ate them.
Wow, that's terrifying, but may I ask, in what particular matter did they are lacking in?
Yes, the defeat of Moriori is easily to predict since the Moriori were a small, isolated population of hunter-gatherers, equipped with only the simplest technology and weapons, entirely inexperienced at war, and lacking strong leadership or organization, while the Maori invaders came from a dense population of farmers, chronically engaged in ferocious wars, equipped with more advanced technology and weapons, and operating under strong leadership.
So, you need to have a strong leader and advanced technology and weapons to survive.
Yes, the history of the two groups constitute a brief, small-scale natural experiment that tests how environment affect human societies. While in environmental-related variation in substance, human population densities depend on the island where they in. Regarding to the politics, islands near one another might become combined into a single political unit. On the other hand, single large rugged island were divided into many deep independent political units. Hence, the area of the political units varied not only with an island's area but also with its fragmentation and isolation. For example, people in neighboring step-sided valley of the Marquesas communicated with each other mainly by sea. Each valley formed an independent political entity of a few thousand inhabitants, and most individual large Marquesas Island remained undivided into many such entities.
Speaking of war, on the chapter 3 of Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamonds, entitled Collision at Cajamarca.
The biggest population shift of modern times has been the colonization of the New World by Europeans. Atahualpa and his army came to be at Cajamarca because they had just won decisive battles in a civil war that left the Incas divided and vulnerable. The reason for the civil war was an epidemic of smallpox had killed the Inca Emperor Huayna Capac and most of his court around 1526, and then immediately killed his designated heir, that is Ninan Kuyukchi. Those that precipitated a contest for the throne between Atahualpa and his half-brother Huascar. In this highlights one of the key factors in the world history, and it is the diseases transmitted to people lacking immunity by the invading peoples with considerable immunity.
So, as you have mentioned, Atahualpa and his half-brother contested for the throne. It's like a movie called Cleopatra.
Yeah.
Have you watched that movie on Netflix?
I've watched it one time, and that was a very good one.
I haven't.
How about you, Justice? Have you watched it?
I haven't watched it yet, but maybe after this podcast.
Yes.
That's a very good
After
one.
this
Yes.
podcast. So, the collision at Cajamarca is a brilliant one, right?
Yes, super duper brainy. So, going back to our topic a while ago, the contest that happened in
The throne.
the throne,
Yes.
I'm intrigued again. So, I would like to ask you, what did Atahualpa do after the death of the Emperor Huayna Capac?
Yes, regarding that, well, that time Pizarro came to Cajamarca because of maritime technology, and it's coupled with political organization that was similarly essential for European expansion to other continents, as well as the expansion of many other peoples.
How did it relate to Atahualpa?
Yeah, the Inca Emperor, or rather Inca Empire, also had a centralized political organization, but that actually worked to its disadvantage because Pizarro seized the Inca chain of command intact by capturing Atahualpa.
And Pizarro's team won?
Yes, since Pizarro's military advantages lay in the Spaniards' steel sword and other weapons, steel armors, guns, and horses. But while Atahualpa's troops, without animals on which to ride into battles, could oppose only stone, bronze, and wooden clubs, maces, and hand axe, plus slingshot and kilted armor.
So I am intrigued with this Pizarro's team won, right? Can you elaborate this?
The proximate factors that resulted in Europeans colonizing the New World instead of the Native Americans colonizing Europe.
Well, on that part, Pizarro's capture of Atahualpa illustrates the set of proximate factors that resulted in European colonizing the New World instead of Native Americans colonizing the Europe. The immediate reason for Pizarro's success included military technology based on guns, steel weapons, and horses, infectious diseases endemic in Eurasia, European maritime technology, the centralized political organization of European states, and writing.
So they use hard power.
Yes.
Military, yes.
Well, the title of this book will serve as the shorthand for this those proximate factors which also enable modern Europeans to conquer people of other continents. Long before anyone began manufacturing guns and steel, other of those same factors had led to the expansion of some non-European people.
So, European colonized the New World. Anyways, chapter 4, entitled The Rise and Spread of Food Production. How did the people before feed themselves, Zaylin?
Well, all humans on Earth fed themselves inclusively by hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants. It's only within the last 11,000 years that some people turned to what is termed food production, that is domesticating wild animals and plants and eating the resulting livestock and crops. Today, most people on Earth consume food that they produce themselves or that someone else produces for them. Different people acquire food production at different time in prehistory.
Well, indeed, they feed themselves to survive.
Yes. And in indirect way involve the consequences of the sedentary lifestyle enforced by food production.
So, speaking of lifestyle, we all know that male are responsible for hunting and gathering, right?
Yes.
But how about the woman, especially the mother that has a toddler?
A hunter-gatherer mother who is shifting camp can carry on only one child. She cannot afford to bear her next child until the previous toddler can walk fast enough to keep up with the tribe and not hold it back. Hunter-gatherers raise their children about 4 years apart by means of lactational amenorrhea, sexual abstinence, infanticide, and abortion.
So it is good that even before they have rules, and it's not easy to bear a child while working. Going back to the topic, during the civilization, how valuable are crops and livestock are then?
Crops and livestock are valued not only in direct and direct ways, but also in keeping us warm and providing us with valuable materials. Crops and livestock yield natural fibers for making clothing, blankets, nets, and rope. Before animal domestication, the sole means of transporting goods and people by land was the back of humans. Large mammals changed that. For the first time in history, it's become possible to move heavy goods in large quantities as well as people rapidly over land for long distances.
How about wars way back then?
Plants and animals also contributed to the domestication of war, especially horses whose military role made them the jeeps and Sherman tank of ancient warfare. Also, the germs played an important part in wars when infectious disease like smallpox, measles, and flu arose, specialized germs of humans.
It's like the COVID-19 that we are facing right now. And the role of military is also present in that civilization.
Moving on to chapter 5 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, entitled History's Haves and Have-Nots. Angelica, can you give us a brief introduction of chapter 5?
In this chapter, Diamond explores the disparities between different regions of the world. He mentioned Eurasia, Africa, and Latin America. In terms of power, technology, and wealth, this chapter delves into the historical factors that have contributed to the uneven distribution of power, technology, and wealth among different societies. It explores the role of technology, innovation, diffusion, cultural barriers, competition, and colonization in shaping these disparities.
What does the book says in the chapter 5 of the uneven distribution of the resources?
He mentioned one New Guinean politician named Yali in his book that questioned him about the unequal distribution of cargo. This cargo is material goods and technology of European where Diamond lives and New Guinean where Yali lives. So he's somehow blaming Diamond for this issue that Europeans got more of these so-called cargoes while New Guinean got less. With this, he explains the role of different developments such as agriculture that have played a crucial role in the dominance of a religion.
And then what are those developments?
The developments that have mentioned in the book are writing system, technology, and other advancement in Eurasian societies. This development play a crucial role in their rise to power and dominance. He also discusses the advantages of written language for communication, record keeping, and dissemination of knowledge. He examines the technology and innovation spreaded across different regions. Also, he argues that geographical and environmental factors such as ease of transportation and communication influence the rate and extent of technological diffusion. This diffusion was faster and more extensive in Eurasia due to its interconnectedness and the availability of domesticated animals for transportation. However, there are cultural barriers to technology transfer.
Does this barrier could affect civilization?
Yes, actually, Diamond discusses these certain cultural factors such as resistance to change or the lack of incentive to adopt new technologies could hinder the spread of innovation, like the New Guinean. He also provides examples of societies that rejected or were slow to adopt advantageous technologies, like the Yalis location, right? Diamond also emphasized the role of competition and conflict in driving technological advancement. He argues that competition between societies, both within and between regions, spurred the development and improvement of technology as societies sought to gain advantage over their rivals.
So then, what is the impact on colonization during that time?
Obviously, they
Dominate.
colonize
Yes.
the New World, and also he asserted that the consequences of European colonization on the technological and social development of the colonized regions devastated, especially on the effects of diseases, the disruption of traditional societies, and the extraction of resources, which contributed to the widening disparities between different regions of the world.
Chapter 6 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, To Farm or Not to Farm. Can you give us a brief discussion of what the Chapter 6 tackles?
Well, it is a transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural societies and explores the reason why some societies choose to adopt agriculture while others did not. It explores the origin, benefits, and consequences of agriculture as a transformative development in human societies. So this is geography determinism. Anyways, it analyzed the environmental and cultural factors that influence the adaptation of agriculture and examines the spread of this innovation across different regions of the world.
What's with the agricultural development about in that chapter?
Actually, he explains that agriculture development as a response to changing environmental conditions and the need for more stable and reliable food. He outlines the advantages that agriculture provides over a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. It provides surplus of food supply. And then these advantages includes the ability to produce a food supply, as I have mentioned, which led to population growth, sedentary living, division of labor, and the development of complex societies.
What about the domestication of plants and animals and its environmental factors?
Well, the domestication of plants and animals played a crucial role in the rise of agriculture. Domestication of various crops and livestock highlights the importance of certain factors such as availability of suitable species and the ease of domestication. He emphasized the role of environmental factors in determining the suitability of a region for agriculture. Also, he explains how the availability of wild plants and animals that could have domesticated, along with favorable climate condition and soil fertility, influence the development of agriculture societies.
So since you have given emphasis to the advantages of the development of agriculture, what would be the consequences of it?
He mentioned drawbacks as a acknowledged, such as health risks, increased workload, vulnerability to crops, crop failure, and the spread of disease associated with the shift to an agricultural lifestyle.
So is it the reason why some societies did not adopt agriculture?
It is one of the reasons, yes. And Diamond examines the reasons that these factors that I have mentioned, such as cultural preferences, geographical constraint, and the availability of alternative resources, are suitable for hunter-gatherer lifestyle rather than agriculture.
This chapter concludes with a discussion of how agriculture spread from its place of origin to other regions. Chapter 7 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, How to Make an Almond. Angelica, we would like to ask you, what is the importance of the domestication of plants and animals?
He discusses the domestication of various plants, including cereals like wheat, barley, and rice, as well as other important crops like corn, potatoes, and beans. He explores the challenges and successes in the domestication process, such as selecting plants with larger seeds, non-shattering seeds heads, and reduced toxicity. The domestication of animals, on the other hand, and their role in human societies. Diamond discusses the domestication of livestock such as goats, sheep, cattle, and horses, and pigs, highlighting the advantage they brought, such as steady food supply, labor assistance, and transportation.
You discussed the domestication of various plants, right? So
Yes.
is there any requirement for this kind of domestication?
Yes, actually. The criteria that make certain plants and animals suitable for domestication are like diet, growth, rate, temperament, breeding behavior, and social structure.
Chapter 8 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, Apples or Indians. How about in Chapter 8? What are the key highlights for this chapter?
In this chapter, Diamond examines the impact of European colonization on the indigenous people of the Americas, particularly focusing on the devastating effect of disease and the conquest of the New World. It provides an analysis of the devastating effect of European colonization on the indigenous people of the Americas. It examines the role of diseases, technological disparities, cultural differences, and the subsequent conquest and colonization of the New World.
So, what are the diseases that are mentioned in this chapter, and what is the role of the indigenous population?
The diseases that have brought by Europeans mentioned on the book are smallpox, measles, and influenza on the indigenous population of Americas. Diamond explains that the lack of previous exposure and immunity to this disease led to catastrophic mortality rates, disseminating native communities and leaving them vulnerable to further conquest. Diamond discusses the factors that facilitated the rapid spread of disease among indigenous population, including dense settlements, trade networks, and lack of immunity. He also highlights the role of inadvertent transmission by European explorers, settlers, and their domesticated animals.
Aside from what you have mentioned, diseases, are there any disparities that Diamond examined?
Actually, the technological disparities between European and indigenous societies, including firearms, metal tools, and shipbuilding, which provided a significant military advantage to the European colonizers.
If that's the case, what is the responses of indigenous people to European concerning colonization?
He discusses various responses of indigenous people, ranging from resistance and armed conflict to collaboration and accommodation.
Chapter 9 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, Zebras, Unhappy Marriages, and the Anna Karenina Principle. As we have mentioned in the earlier part of our discussion, in Chapter 7, can you give us some examples of domesticated animals mentioned?
He mentioned cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, horses, camels, llamas, yaks, reindeer, and various poultry species. He also discusses the advantage these animals brought to human societies and their contribution to development of agriculture, trade, and transportation.
Is there any chance of that animal were not successfully domesticated?
Yes, Diamond examines the characteristics of some wild animals that made them unsuitable for domestication, such as their aggressive behavior, inability to breed in captivity, specialized diets, or lack of hierarchical social structure. Furthermore, he introduces the concept of Anna Karenina principle. It is a successful domestication that requires animals to meet a multitude of criteria similar to the character in Leo Tolstoy's novel.
To our next topic, entitled Spacious Skies and Access of the Chapter 10 of the Guns, Germs, and Steel. In Chapter 10, Jared Diamond contends that the availability of domesticable plants and animals is significantly influenced by the orientation of the continent's axis and its proximity to the equator.
Oh, so you mean axis as in axis of the continent?
Yeah, you got it.
So that means this chapter tackles the geographic advantages in relation to geostructure as well as resources.
Yes, absolutely right.
Well then, my question is how geography has influenced the growth of human culture.
The solution for that question is Diamond demonstrates in his point in the book with the examples from several continents. He actually points out that although Africa's north-south axis made it more challenging for such a diffusion to occur, Eurasia's east-west axis made it easy for crops and technology to diffuse.
What is Diamond's approach that emphasizes how crucial geography has been influential?
Axis orientations may have had an impact on the rate of the spread of the following: the writing, the wheels, and the other technologies, as well as the crops and the cattle. Thus, the fundamental aspect of geography greatly influenced the vastly varied experiences of Native Americans, Africans, and Eurasians. The extent to which different groups and livestock species expanded, however, also varied greatly, okay?
Then why does the other continent or countries develop
Differently.
It is because of what the certain regions are ecologically or extremely favorable for food production and others are not. As we have discussed in previously, not all countries or axis or region have seen the same technical or economic gains.
This means that geographical location matters. Anyways, moving to chapter 11, titled Lethal Gift or Livestocks.
Chapter 11 offers the insightful information on the complicated historical relationship between the people and animals on how it has influenced our present society.
Let's proceed to chapter 12, titled Blueprints and Borrowed Letters.
In chapter 12 of Jared Diamond's book, Guns, Germs, and Steel examines the contribution that the literature has made to the diffusion of knowledge and technology. In contrast to oral traditions, he also contends that the writing made it possible for cultures to transfer knowledge across longer distances and to more people. This chapter also covered the value of cultural diffusion, which he refers to as the adoption of ideas from different civilizations.
So, the title is Blueprints and Borrowed Letter, right? So, from the title itself, we assume that this has something to do with various communication devices. So, can you at least enumerate some communication devices and will you please elaborate those?
There are lots of communication devices that actually Jared Diamond included in the book.
Well, the major.
Okay, this actually includes the cuneiform, phonemes, alphabet, logograms, syllabary, and the rebus principle.
so many communication devices?
Yes.
However, can you give us a little briefly introduction about this chapter?
This chapter cites the instances how the paper was created in China and then transported through the Islamic world to each through Europe. He also explores the ways in which Polynesians taught European explorers how to navigate throughout their expeditions. This chapter also highlights the interconnectedness of human societies throughout history. It shows how innovations in one part of the world could have far-reaching effects on others.
Moving on to chapter 13 titled Necessity Mothers. Michael, can you give us a brief introduction about this chapter?
Okay. Jared Diamond contends that rather than being the consequence of ingenuity, the evolution of weapons was driven by need. In the chapter 13 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, wherein Jared Diamond stated that the struggle for resources and dominance among many cultures led to the desire for superior weaponry. He also added that the significance of environmental conditions such as raw material availability in deciding which nation were able to produce more effective weapons. More to that, he also mentioned in the book that the cultural issues also influenced scientific progress, although he does not go into the detail on this topic. Despite these drawbacks, Chapter 13 is a crucial reminder that rather than being the result of individual genius, technical advancement is frequently influenced by external influences. Diamond provides insightful information on how cultures change in this topic. Diamond provides insightful information regarding the chapter on how cultures change throughout time by investigating the origins of the gun via a comprehensive perspective.
So how does Diamond's theory that invention is in fact the mother of necessity bear upon the traditional heroic model of invention?
The answer for that is humans have been inventing, innovating, and creating new things since the dawn of civilization. People also require food to live, and humanity has always been fascinated by the Earth's incredible diversity of living things.
Moving on to chapter 14 titled
From Egalitarianism to Kleptocracy. In this chapter, Jared Diamond explores the transition from the egalitarian societies to hierarchical ones. He also argues that this shift was largely due to the development of agriculture and the accumulation of wealth, as well as power that came with it. He also analyzes it through and well supported by historical evidences. He also provided examples in this chapter from various societies around the world, including the Inca Empire, which we already have discussed a while ago, and
South America.
South America and the Maori in the New Zealand, which Zailin discusses.
Yes.
He also acknowledges that there were exceptions to this trend, such as the Native American tribes who maintained egalitarianism despite practicing agriculture. Overall, while Diamond's analysis is compelling and informative, it is a more comprehensive exploration of all potential factors would have strengthened his argument even further.
Moving on to chapter 15 titled Yali's Question. Michael, can you give us a brief introduction and what are these questions of Yali?
On our topic in chapter 15, Jared Diamond uses Yali's question as a starting point to explore this topic further. His question is why Europeans have so much cargo or material wealth while his people do not. Diamond argues in the book that this is not due to any inherent superiority of one race over another, but it is rather due to the geographic luck. For example, the Eurasian continent had more domesticable plants and animals, which allowed them for the development of agriculture. Overall, Diamond's analysis highlights the importance of geography in determining a society's level of development, but also recognizes the complexity of factors at play. Now, moving on to the next chapter, let's proceed to chapter 16, How China Became Chinese.
Was about how the Chinese did not go far outside of Asia, but even if they sat at home all day, they accomplished a lot, even managed to construct a few walls. So, examining the history of European colonization reveals that the first explorers from this area crossed oceans to venture over what you call these enigmatic and little known areas on other continents. So, in this chapter, he discusses how China expanded in a centralized manner and how it managed to maintain this appearance of centralization. He claims that China is not only a melting pot but also appears nonsensical to question how China became Chinese. So Diamond used the theory of geographic determinism to analyze Chinese history in an effort to shed light on one of history's greatest puzzle: why over the course of the last 2,000 years, China has remained so linguistically, culturally, and politically similar while so many other nations have undergone revolutions and paradigm shift in the same period of time.
Since you have mentioned Chinese linguistically,
Yes.
can you take us a closer look to the Chinese language?
So China has 8 big languages, all of which are connected to Mandarin. So thousands or even tens of thousands of people speak hundreds of little languages. Many of these languages share structural similarities with languages spoken more often in contemporary countries like Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, or in Myanmar.
And as far as I remember, according to the additional linguistic research, the earliest Mandarin Chinese speakers lived in northern and southern China. A new language frequently replaces an existing one in a territory because of the powerful warriors or the colonists employ it.
Yes, that's true. So the colonists in this instance push many of their adversaries into other areas, so dispersing the languages of the communities they have defeated. Studying Chinese geography is the first step in trying to explain Chinese history, though the diversity of Chinese terrain would seem to justify the establishment of numerous minor states with varied cultures. So Diamond doesn't go into great detail about that process because he covered the fundamental ideas behind such a historical process in the part 2 of the book. So it is crucial to keep in mind, though, that due to differences in climate and food availability, the northern and southern Chinese may have evolved agriculture independently.
And Ate Justice, how about the how has technology spread during the time?
So the technology during that time, through the rivers that connect North and South China, are unusual because they appear to defy Diamond's dictum that diffusion is more easily accomplished from east to west than from north to south. Although there were minor climatic differences between the north and the south of China, rivers connected the majority of the country, which helped numerous technologies spread throughout the country.
Notably, Diamond leaves certain questions unanswered on the reasons why technology spread primarily to from north to south, or why the northern Chinese appear to produce more significant technologies than the southern Chinese.
Yes, you'll see in this that Diamond doesn't provide an explanation for why the northern Chinese, who also possess agriculture and sophisticated technology, ended up ruling the entirety of China rather than the southern Chinese. Did you know that according to critics, Diamond does a better job of clarifying why agricultural societies prevailed over non-agricultural cultures than he does in elucidating why certain agricultural societies won over others. So other peoples of China were either expelled or culturally eliminated, just as the northern and southern Chinese joined due to their shared cultures and length of history.
To our
Ano na tayo? 17.
moving forward to chapter 17 of Moving forward to chapter 17 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, a speedboat to Polynesia. For our opening question, will you discuss the largest cultural expansion in the last 6,000 years?
So, the largest population migration in the previous 6,000 years was the Austronesian expansion, which is discussed in which we will discuss here in chapter 17. So, the Pacific island of the coast of South China, where the expansion started, where practically the only place this similar enormous cultural development occurred. So, through linguistic and physical traces, archaeologists have been able to track the migrations of diverse cultures. This evidence demonstrates the quick end to this cultural spread. So, in relation to the history of Pacific Islands or the Austronesian expansion, he or the author Jared Diamond claims that the details of language distribution offer important hints as to the path taken by this proposed Austronesian expansion. So, in contrast to China, where there is a high level of ethnic and cultural cohesion, New Guinea is extremely diverse with many ethnic groups and cultures being hostile to one another, as indicated by the prevalence of derogatory stereotypes about various ethnic groups.
What permitted Southeast Asian to spread into Austronesia?
So this makes a suggestion in response to the issue to Diamond. Southeast Asian population moved into Austronesia as a result of their agricultural know-how.
Chapter 18, Hemispheres Colliding. For our opening question, Jared Diamond's book of list of number of elements that contributed to the success of the European conquest of the New World. Can you outline important elements about this chapter?
So this chapter was all about the voyage of Columbus to the New World in 1492. It is one of the largest scale attempts in the history of Europe to spread over the world. So the incredibly advantages that European conquistadors enjoyed over native people in the Americas are covered in this chapter. So he explains the key distinction between native communities in North and South America and European societies, as well as why the latter were fundamentally doomed.
So what can we learn more from this chapter?
In this chapter, we'll learn why the New World didn't advance more advanced technology or societal centralization in the pre-Columbian era. So despite Diamond spending a lot of time discussing the cultural clash between Europe and the New World after 1492 AD, the Native American societies were unable to develop genetic barriers to disease due to the absence of big domesticated mammals, making the arrival of the Europeans and the subsequent spread of disease lethal to them. So the agriculture encourages a civilization to create specialized occupations, sophisticated technology, and centralized states, but without the necessary geographic conditions, these conditions that were essentially non-existent in the New World, agriculture can never take root in the community.
So you're saying that after 1492 AD, when European societies began to explore the New World, they were able to beat the Native Americans by using their advantages. Moving on to chapter 19 of Guns, Germs, and Steel, entitled How Africa Became Black. Can you elaborate to us or explain to us how Africa became black?
So as Jared Diamond notes in this chapter, How Africa Became Black, there are many misconceptions regarding Africa and its racial composition, particularly among Americans. So Africa alone is home to a quarter of all languages in use today. So in regards to this, he claims that no other continent contains as much human variation as Africa does here in this chapter. So Africa is the region of the world where humans have existed for the longest. The colonization of Africa by Europeans accounts for some of this presumption. This presumption have some roots in the European colonization of the continent.
So Africa is a diverse continent, making it challenging to analyze history. Once again, Diamond reduced a wide variety of racial and ethnic group to a small number of divisions.
So the Austronesian colonies were able to move to Madagascar because of Indian Ocean commercial networks, demonstrating the significance of trade and spread throughout the human history. Another crucial point is, why did European colonize the sub-Saharan Africa rather than the other way around?
So Europeans possess a number of significant advantages. So these are the advantages where the first is sub-Saharan Africa lacked access to domesticated animals, whereas Europeans had. Second is because they had access to a wider range of domesticable plants. Europeans advanced in agriculture before sub-Saharan Africans did. Third, because of its shared latitude with numerous other centralized cultures, Europe was able to pick up significant discoveries and technology from them. So the Sahara Desert prevented communication with North Africa, and sub-Saharan Africans had no neighbors to east or to the west.
So the conclusion of this chapter serves as a powerful reminders of the motivations behind Diamond's claim that he wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel in the first place. He intended to dispel once and for all the racist ideas that have led some people to believe that Europeans are fundamentally superior than Africans or Native Americans. Overall, it was a complicated interactions of internal causes rather than any inherent superiority on the part of Europeans that caused them to engulf other culture. We are done with the 19 chapters of Guns, Germs, and Steel. Can we have a round of applause for us passing this chapter? Thank you guys for your cooperation.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Again,